All right, so I think I found the best stability and performance balance for my 9950X3D for my undervolt. So this is going to be an updated video of a couple of past videos I've done. And I do believe this is the best one that I've come up with after all the experimenting and crashing on my PC that I've done. So, and I think with the new 9950X3D2 coming out, I think I might have got an issue that may not an issue in general, but something that would bother me. And I'll let you know what that is once I get to that part of the video. So as you see here, I got Expo 1 set up. I put my Infinity Fabric to 2067 and I got for 1 on UCLK and memclock. Now the reason why I put this down to 2067 is because it's for stability reasons. While 2100 did work, I do believe it did put a little extra stress on the system, and I changed my mindset on a few things when it comes to this stuff. I'm no longer chasing the coldest temperatures possible. I'm actually going for the fine balance between stability and performance. So if I have to sacrifice a little bit of undervolt and things like that, that's what I came to a compromise, and I actually ended up having a little bit better performance in the long run rather than just me going for the lowest possible negative undervolts. So let me move forward and I'll show you what I mean. Go to Precision Boost Overdrive. There we go. So as you can see here, I put it on advanced, PBO limits to motherboard, and then I set the overdrive scaler control to manual, and I put 2x. Now the reason why I put my scaler on 2x, I used to have it on 10, and reason being is because 10 did introduce some extra instability. Even though it did work, it did add a little bit more instability. And the fact that and I should have said this in my last videos too, if you put on 10x, you do run the risk of damaging your silicone. Now, it may not be as a right away thing. It could be done over time. So saying that adding that little bit extra voltage 10x it would, say if your CPU would last right around 4 years or whatever, it could only last right around 2.5 to 3 years. You never know. Everyone's silicone's a little different. So just for safety reasons, I put it back on 2x. And not to mention, the performance difference between 2x and 10x, at least on mine, is not that big a deal. So I got increased stability and there wasn't much of a performance boost to it. So I just put on 2x. And then for my clock override, I did positive for 175. And again, that's with stability. When I had it set for 200, my system was a little bit less stable. Once I backed it off to 175, that pretty much fixed a lot of the instability I had on that end, and it was pretty nice. And then I set my throttle limit to 90, and then let's get into the curve optimizer. So as you see here, I did per core, and I'm able to get a lot more undervolts on. I got -17 for 0, -16 for 1, -2, oh, I'm sorry, core 2 at -18, and as you can see here, as you go down the line, I was able to get further down. So CCD 0 is cores 0 all the way through 7. And this is the part I was talking to you about, the X3D2. So on the 9950X3D, cores 0 through 7 is CCD 0, and that's the core that has your 3dB cache. And if you noticed, if I scroll down, CCD 1 has higher undervolt. I was able to get -25 with stability. And there's two reasons why. One, I learned that with my chip, that CCD 0 that has a 3dB cache is a little more sensitive to these undervolts. So you're not, for me at least, I was not able to get as high as an undervolt on those as I like. I was crashing my PC. It bricked up. It was just bad. And I had to redo my BIOS on a couple occasions. So that's what I realized. And I'm wondering now, with the X3D2 coming out in the next week or so, is that going to happen with both CCDs? Is it happening on both 0 and 1? So not only can you do less of an undervolt, you're also going to run hotter. So I guess that kind of makes sense, but I don't know. I mean, this is just what I've noticed with on my chip alone, but everyone's chips are different. So you may have a golden chip that you can do -25 on both and run great, but I'm stuck with the one I have here, and I still do pretty good performance. And like I showed you down here, the rest of mine, with the exceptions of 7 and 8 and 9, or I'm sorry, 8 and 9, everything else was set to 25 and it was stable. Now, the reason I was able to get these undervolts like the way it is, and I was actually able to get 3 degrees cooler, is my old way I did it was I did curve shaper. And I would put negative on the frequency, and then I put with like -5 and things like that. And it turns out when you're doing double negatives, it does not equal a positive like you would say in math, right? But no, with this, what it actually did was it pretty much put too much. It took away too much voltage from the CPU, so it caused it to do a lot of breaking up, and it did not do a lot of processes correctly, and it freezed a lot, or froze, I should say. But the issue is when you're doing those on negative curve optimizer and negative curve shaper, you're just taking away too much power. So what I ended up doing is I changed everything to positive, and I started out with +3 on every one of these, with the exception of minimum and low frequency. That was just to try to keep the system as stable as possible, and they don't really mean too much when it comes to gaming and doing some processes and stuff. So when I go down, I was able to get everything at +1. So what it does is when you have those undervolts on the curve optimizer so high, you can switch over to curve shaper, add a positive to each one of these, and for a while I did have like a 2 and a 1 and 1, which was pretty cool, and it worked and was pretty stable. So I decided to try it one more time, and I backed the 2s down to 1, and it ran a lot cooler and more efficient, and I was still pretty stable. So the way you would realize if you're unstable is, so you can actually run great benchmarks and you can run games just fine for most part. But what I noticed on my end was when I try to do a big download of maybe an update on a program, or I downloaded something else, another program, and it would just, or try to install, and it would freeze. So after some research, and I talked with some of my friends who do the same thing, it actually ended up being that I was on the edge of that stability, just right there. Like I was just over the instability part, and I needed to just, maybe lose a little bit of undervolt and change my curve shaper enough to just be put back on the other side of being stable. Did I have to sacrifice some? Yes, because when I used to have all this at like -22, with the exception of 1 and 4. And then these were at like -28, and I even got away with some 29s in here. But the problem is, yeah, I could play the games fine, and I could run video editing, but the issue with me was when I tried to do those downloads, I would freeze up. And so I had to back it down. So I backed it down to 27, and I backed these down one by one each, and still same thing. It would, even if I had my curve shaper at +2 on all the other ones, it would still freeze up. So I went into BIOS here, and then I finally changed it to what you see here. And then I went to curve shaper, and I had everything on 2. And then from curve shaper, what I did is I kept this at 2, and I went to 1, 1. And that was pretty stable. and I was only hitting maybe when I ran Cinebench 23, 78 degrees Celsius at the max temp. And then I was like, you know what? Let me try this then. So I took away the twos. I turned these twos into one. So when you do that, you take away the extra voltage that it feeds into, and it runs a little cooler. So you're still getting the best of both worlds. But you got to keep, if you're going into positive, you got to keep these a little on the lower side. At least for me, I had to. And then next thing you know, I ran Cinebench. It was stable, and I ran at like 76 degrees. And I decided not to push it from there because I would play Crimson Desert, you know, that new game that's pretty popular. And I was getting on cinematic about 160 to 175 FPS on without DLSS on my Astral 5090, and it was running smooth. I was able to do downloads, I could do installs, and everything's straight now. And I even run a 3D Mark stress test for a while, and it put me at like 98.9, I think was the best one. And then I also ran some ADA64 Extreme, no crashes for over 30 to 45 minutes. And then the best way to stress test, really, honestly, when you do these undervolts is for just play games. Play a game for like 3 hours and see how it performs. I mean, you know your system better than anybody, right? So if you know the game's acting sluggish, you might want to check your undervolt. But so this is my updated video, and I hope you guys like it. Please like and subscribe, and I'll be looking forward to making more videos for you guys in the future. Thanks. Have a good day, guys.